Jesse Noby. Jesse is one of our lead technology strategists. Jesse and I have collaborated to implement the majority of the sports teams that we've worked with. He and I have tag teamed on. Jesse handles a lot of the technical stuff, especially when it comes to integrations, how we are bringing in the CRM data, how the data should flow. And then for those of you that were on the user group last quarter, he shared something pretty swanky around what we did with the Florida Panthers and their ticket sale opportunities. So at this point, before I turn it over to Jesse, if there is anyone listening who is not interested in the way things work in Eloqua around branding and deliverability, then you can feel free to drop, and we appreciate you attending. For everyone else, I'd like to introduce Jesse Noby. And Jesse, I'll control the slides from here. Just let me know when you want me to go to the next.
Thanks, Randy. And I would say, this is going to apply to all marketing automation systems. This is really just the way Eloqua does it. So if you want to stick around and see the Eloqua way, it's probably going to spill over into, a HubSpot or a Marketo too, or Pardot, whatever it is you guys are on. So you can go to the next slide. So what are we going to do today? Well, I'm going to dive into what branding deliverability even means. If it's been a while since you've implemented your system, you've probably forgotten, or you may be more focused on one or the other at this point. Then we're going to say, knowing your options, what's out there. So this is more of an Eloqua specific thing, but again, your provider may have lots of different options as well, and it's good to know what you have and how to leverage that. There's going to be a lot of definitions. I won't go through all of them unless you guys want to hear them, but I'll try and hit some of the high points. And then you can have this later as a resource so that you can just, go back and check out those definitions. And then finally, the takeaway from this is it's going to be an improved contact experience. And we'll get into how that comes into the fore, all right? So let's go to the next slide. All right, so branding and deliverability. What am I even talking about? Branding and deliverability is something that we typically do during an implementation of Eloqua or another marketing automation system. It's the nuts and bolts of how we actually get email sending and how we get the messaging back when we've, sent an email that goes somewhere that is not deliverable, right? And so both of those things are really important. Typically, we have a call or maybe even two calls where we talk through these settings. And we want to be sure that we're being conscientious of what we're doing, what's already out there, how does this play off of your brand. So let's just go through a few quick definitions here. So branding refers to making technical aspects of Eloqua or your marketing automation system pertain to a given brand. If you are the sole operator of your instance, then it's just you, right? But as you'll see, when we're talking to sports teams, that's not always the case. So we want to be thinking about that as well. So I just used our brand as an example. With the, and again, we'll see this with the standard and above trims in Eloqua, you're able to actually have image and file URLs that are also branded. But from the very basic side of things, we're looking at who's emailing and, where is the bounce back messaging coming back to. Deliverability is probably something you're going to be more focused on because you're very concerned about getting the emails into your contacts' hands. So that's something that you'll be looking at on an ongoing basis to determine, are we overdoing it? Are we underdoing it? Is the content that we're sending quality? Those sorts of things. So the crux of what I'm talking about is more about enabling that to happen. All right, let's go to the next slide. So here, we've got a lot of definitions, the next couple of slides. I'll just start at the top, and then, if anybody wants, I can go into more detail here. But I think, most critically, when you're getting into this conversation, you need to understand what bounce back means. And I think a lot of marketers are going to know about hard and soft bounce backs, right? Hard bounce back, you can't email them because that email address literally does not exist for one reason or another. And a soft bounce back means that someone has their out of office on, or their mailbox is full, something like that. So as we go through this process, we set up an actual inbox that Oracle creates to collect this information. And then as those messages come in, Eloqua collects them and takes appropriate action. It shows them in reporting, it marks the contacts as hard bounces, and then that ties back into your segmentation. So it's very critical that we do this piece correctly, because without it, you're not going to be able to act on any of that information, and you're just going to be sending emails out, thinking that everything is good to go. As a part of this process, you want to avoid so-called spammy words. So we don't want to put marketing or sales or things like that in any place here. We don't want to put bounce or bounce back necessarily. You want to be a little bit more creative. So if it's something that pertains to your brand or something quirky that you do, use that. Play around with it. Have fun. But as it pertains to bounce backs, just keep in mind that nobody's actually going to see that information. It's best that you stick to those fun terms and things in user-facing capacity. So in the URL of a landing page, or in the from address and the reply to address in your emails. If it's a message coming from a salesperson, well, customize that email to be coming from them. But, again, stay away from anything that is going to hurt your reputation. So marketing, sales, that sort of thing. Those gray filters, spam filters, they pick up on those sorts of things, and it hurts your reputation. Now, SPF, DKIM, DMARC, I won't go into the specific details of what these are, but these are all things that are really nice to have. SPF is a requirement when we do this with Eloqua, but with some of the trims, you get DKIM included with that. And basically what these things do is they say, we are allowing Eloqua to send email on our behalf, and we're showing that we're a legitimate sender. So this is all designed to prohibit bad actors from pretending to be you in one way or another. So the three of these together really show that you're concerned about your deliverability and that you are a so-called good actor, right? And we can go to the next slide. You guys can just, read through that after the call. Here's just a few more things. We don't really need to go into too much detail on these. I do want to call out virtual MTA, because as you'll see in the Eloqua packages, at the very highest level of branding and deliverability, at the premium level, we use these things called virtual MTAs. And that allows you to say that different email communications go over your specific IP addresses that you own that have been given to you by Oracle with that package. And the benefit of that is that you are able to really curate the reputation of those different IP addresses. So you could say, hey, this group within our organization, they just batch and blast, and they don't do a very good job. They're only allowed to send out of this one IP address. And you could set things up that way so that, the more important communications, the ones going to your premium members or whatever, segment that you care about, you can send that information, that communication on a specific IP as well. The Yahoo feedback loop is just one of many. It's just another way for you to get additional information about what people are doing with mail once it gets into their inbox. So the Yahoo feedback loop is just one that kind of comes along with this whole thing. All right, let's go to the next slide. And any questions from anybody up until this point? I see. Yeah, we've got one about addresses. Yes, I'd be happy to. All right, so Eloqua has 4 trims. And trims is, another word for just levels. You may or may not be familiar with that term. Basic, everybody gets that, no matter what. But certain, sports and entertainment trims come with, different levels, and then you can work up from there. The basic or so-called branded bounce back configuration is a pool of IP addresses that are shared by a number of Eloqua instances. So, there are pros and cons to this. It's easier to set up. There's not a lot of moving parts or anything for you to think about. Oracle manages the reputation of all those IP addresses. So, if there are other instances that aren't doing things, the way they should, Oracle handles that behind the scenes. But this doesn't, again, it's not as great because you don't get all these nice bells and whistles that come along with that. So standard and up is what I would really recommend for a sports team or a stadium or a group of those things. What you get with standard is 3 bounce back subdomains, uh, 3 bounce backs. You get the branded image and file URLs. You get DKIMs, you get feedback loop, all this stuff. Why this is important is because if it really depends on the relationship and who is making that Eloqua purchase. So if it is a stadium, in my experience, that is going to be the primary brand. And there are usually a number of teams associated with that stadium. There's, concerts and things like that. So you could have multiple stakeholders in one instance. We need to be sure that when email goes out, that people are identifying with the appropriate brand. Now, if it's just the one team and each team has its own, map or whatever, then it's a different situation and you would handle things a little bit differently. But we want to be sure that, with the 3 bounce backs and the 3 subdomains, that we're portioning those out correctly so that the end users understand where that mail is coming from and they make that identification. So can we go to the next slide? And so on up from there. So enterprise and premium, they just bring a lot more numbers to the game. Enterprise is 20 of these different things. You get 3 static IPs instead of just 1, but you don't get the custom routing that I was talking about before. So that's really the primary differentiator between standard and enterprise is those 3 IP addresses. And then the differentiator between enterprise and premium is that you can BCC an address and that you can route your messaging, those different bounce back addresses, to different IPs. So you can really customize where the mail is going out from. Any questions on this stuff? And so I think, I was talking to a team a little while ago, and we were talking about deliverability and what can you do to improve it. And we had this kind of conversation where it's like, well, Jesse, we're not the only stakeholders in this instance of Eloqua, and we know that there are people in here that they don't care about nurture, they don't care about different things. Directions are coming down from the top. We have to just email 30,000 people. We don't care who they are. I think premium is an excellent fit for those situations because you can, push those people off to their own IP address, let them ruin the reputation on that IP. And then the team or, whoever is owning this that is serious about sending email and getting through can focus on their, quality contacts and improving that reputation. So I know it's, you guys will definitely want to talk to Oracle about pricing and things like that, but I think that it could be worth, whatever they would be charging. All right, let's go to the next slide. And so, just recapping a few of the points that I made so far, really think through the relationship between different teams, the stadium, entertainment options, who is sending those communications, because I know that some teams will brand entertainment communications or it will be stadium branded or whatever. It's just what are those contacts going to be expecting? Um, let's see. And yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much everything that I've covered so far. So let's go to the next slide. Oh yes, all right. Let's not forget SSL. It's 2019. SSL is an expectation of your website visitors. So recent development with, especially with Oracle and Eloqua, is that they are giving everybody what they call a secure microsite. Secure microsites is just another way for Oracle to say that you're allowed to use SSL on an Eloqua microsite. So there is an additional add-on that you can get where you can create as many of these as you want, and you can apply as many of these certificates as you want, but Oracle is now allowing everybody to have at least one. And I urge you to take advantage of this. So it's another thing where you want to be conscientious and intelligent about what subdomain you use and how you use it. But the big takeaways here are that when people are clicking through links in your emails and going to landing pages that you host in Eloqua, they're going to want to see that lock in the URL. They want to know that it's a secure communication, especially if there's a web form on that page, so that their browser isn't giving them warnings saying, hey, go back to safety or anything like that. And there are some technical considerations to make, which again I won't really go into great detail here, but you need to again be very conscientious of how you set this up so that it doesn't hurt your branding deliverability setup that you may have already done. Another big bonus for this is where it applies to tracking on your websites. So as a part of your implementation, we put a tracking script out on your website. And I know with a lot of you sports guys, it was probably not a lot of fun because there are a lot of people involved in that. But what we did most likely is put the third-party tracking script on your website. That script uses SSL provided by Oracle. But in 2019, third-party cookies, the thing that actually makes that work, are being blocked by browsers by default for the most part. And in browsers where that doesn't happen, people usually have plugins to block them. So what we're doing is moving people over to first-party cookie tracking, which is much more likely to work, allowing you to collect that digital body language. But we don't really want to do it without SSL on that subdomain because, again, on that page, people will be warned there's a non-secure connection. The tracking just won't work. So we want to be sure that we put an SSL certificate on that subdomain. Let's see. I see some questions popping up here, so let me go over there really quick. Yeah, okay. So I'll go to your question, Jenna, about tracking on those other sites. So one thing that you can do is mix the two. So you can use the third-party tracking script that comes out of the box on those partner websites. It doesn't have to be all first-party cookies everywhere. But if it's important enough to you, maybe what you want to do is get that secure microsites add-on and have multiple first-party tracking domains. So the important thing there is that it's the same domain that someone is visiting where you create a subdomain to do the tracking. Otherwise, you couldn't use your primary domain on a Ticketmaster domain. That wouldn't work. That kind of, goes against the purpose of the whole thing. Is that helpful? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree about that with, mapping things out.
Hi, sorry, I unmuted myself. Thank you so much for taking my question. We just struggle a lot with, especially with the third-party e-commerce sites like Ticketmaster and Fanatics. they find it very difficult to advocate for these cookies to get placed, and then once they do, whenever these sites make like big updates, the cookies fall off, and we don't really know when that happens. Do you have any other kind of like workarounds? Like the thing that I do right now is I use exit links as sort of like my e-commerce variables on Google Analytics, but I just would really love to find a way to get that tracking on even just like our page listings. But then I also think about how those are public-facing URLs where people could come to that page regardless, whether or not they came through our universe. I guess that's fine. But just if you guys had like a best practice, I know every single team struggles with this, where like someone else sells our retail and someone else sells our tickets, even if it's not just Ticketmaster. So that would be a really helpful white sheet if you guys could help us understand how to navigate that conversation, how to know what to ask for, and how to know how to sort of like resolve those differences within our tracking when we're doing analysis, as well as like keep those sorts of components in contract as we continue to renew those.
Yeah, and I think just a couple things coming to mind based on what you're saying there is I've seen differences even between different leagues and how they handle, their web properties. So, kind of understanding your challenges and who you're talking to, where you're getting pushback would be really helpful. Because, depending on who you're talking to, you may have a totally different conversation. I mean, ultimately, you need to get this data, right? But convincing different stakeholders would be difficult, right? If it's an IT guy or somebody who's just a gatekeeper, So I would love to understand that better. But I think that knowing all your options is going to be really important and give you ammo to have those different conversations with people, right? To me, if I could have the first-party cookies everywhere, that would be the way I, go about doing things. But it's not always that simple.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was even an option to put first-party cookies on sites that we didn't have registered or full control over. So,
so yeah,
really great to know.
That would be a fun one to explore because that's where you're going to have some conversations, I'm sure, where you would need to actually be persuasive and convince someone, hey, I need you to set up this DNS record for me. We'll take care of the rest. This is why I need it. Please help. But again, going back to the league thing, it can get pretty complex because of all these different relationships and who owns what. So navigating that, it could take time, and you just need to be patient.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for answering that.
You're welcome. Let's see. And can we go to the next slide? I want to be sure that I cover everything. Okay, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about DKIM and DMARC, just very briefly. DKIM and DMARC are two of those definitions that I had earlier on, but basically these are two related technologies centered around email to show that you are indeed who you say you are. So DKIM comes with a standard trim and above with Eloqua deliverability, and it's just a way to sign your email messages. So you have a record out there on the internet, and Oracle creates a counter record. And when the email gets sent, certain ISPs will check out that those two records match. If somebody's trying to pretend to be you, they won't have that signature, and they will fail and go to spam. So DKIM and DMARC are basically both doing similar things there, and they build upon one another. So DMARC is the newer technology that kind of adds to DKIM. And it says, well, this is what I want to happen to certain kinds of email, and you can kind of specify different things that will happen. DKIM is something that you do with Oracle in this case, or with your marketing automation system provider, and DMARC is something that you would configure after doing that. So my recommendation is, if you haven't done this already, go to the different Postmaster tool providers for Google, Microsoft Outlook, and any others. I'm sure there's many more. Those are just the two big ones that I know are out there. and set up their postmaster tools. So this will allow you to do some monitoring of what's happening with the mail going to those ISPs. And also consider getting a monitoring service. So we use MX Toolbox at Tegrita, and it's also MX Toolbox is just something that we use to do our testing and make sure everything is working from the DNS level. But they have a lot of cool tools that aren't super expensive that allow you, again, to get warned when something bad happens to your deliverability or reputation if you get blacklisted. And that way you can be more agile and actually make more informed decisions about what you're doing from a technical perspective and from an actual messaging perspective. Return paths, obviously they have a lot of awesome tools. The only thing I would say there is that they're going to be more expensive than an MX Toolbox, so you'd really want to make that a considered purchase. And Oracle has something called Deliverability Plus, but it's not really necessarily geared toward monitoring like this. It's more about making sure that things got where they were going. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, and then this last slide is just for you guys after the meetup here. I just grabbed a few links that I thought were really useful to me. Mailgun has great documentation. SendGrid has great documentation. They're thought leaders in the space as well. So I totally recommend that you take 20 minutes and read through these things, because it's going to help you really understand what kind of impact your mailing has and your technical choices have. All right, so that's the presentation. I want to go back to the questions and see if we have any more. Jenna, I want to read your question out and see if I can answer it while we still have some time. So you have ticketoffers@bowls.com as your bounce back address, and you're looking to move to bowlsmail@bowls.com. But should you change it to be like blockshots@bowls.com? So, yeah, I mean, I think that any of those names are, they're not necessarily bad in any one way or another, because again, consider that end users aren't seeing this in their email client. It's more that the email client or the ISP is seeing it. So if it's something that's, causing that to raise a red flag, then yeah, you may want to consider changing it. One thing that just coming to mind here is that I was at the Oracle conference a couple years ago at a branding deliverability talk with an Oracle expert, and I said, we will, typically want to rework things if someone's deliverability is going downhill. We want to address it technically. And he was like, dude, it's not going to do much for long, because if it's your sending practices are what really run the show. So before really considering changing technical background, like the undercarriage of this whole thing, look at what you're sending, how often you're sending, how much mail is getting through. Maybe you can even work with ISPs to improve your reputation and get more information on, what they're seeing. Good luck with Google. They won't talk to you, but, use some of these other tools like MX Toolbox to try to get a better understanding of what's actually happening on the ground, and see if you can change your sending behaviors to match. And, this kind of ties back into the whole premium thing and putting anybody on one IP address where they can just kind of do what they want with that, but also having the right conversations with senior leadership to say, hey, it's not always about volume or getting this message out to as many people as we can. We want to prioritize quality. So that's where I would start, and then I would go back to, oh, this address is hurting us for these reasons.
That's super helpful. We actually just did this analysis where, unfortunately, we do share, not unfortunately, we happen to share an instance with our D-League team, And they definitely deal with a lot more of those requests from senior leadership where they are asked to get this offer in front of everyone. Obviously, they're a much more sales-driven team, and I don't think that leadership would like to invest more in another SSL line. But actually, that from address change, we have a relatively high sender score because we use tools like Webula to scrub all of our addresses, and we have a pretty solid, I think, reputation and process in place to make sure that we're only sending messages to people who we know want to receive them. So the sender score wasn't necessarily the motivation. It was more of an internal alignment. We just brought a new resource in-house. We just hired a great email strategist. And it just seemed like a great time for us to say, let's reconsider our email groups. Let's reconsider our from addresses. And so, the key stakeholders within our organization that need to get email directly from consumers as well, we cover off on, we should really be moving our bounce backs from ticket offers at bulls.com because people should be reaching out to that address publicly. So we're trying to roll that off into like a Bulls mail address where we could kind of send like administrative things and have that be our general reply to address. This is super helpful just for understanding like we should have one that's just for bounce backs and
well, and that's actually something that I kind of missed in your question here because the bounce back address that we set up in Eloqua is usually a subdomain. So we wouldn't use a bulls.com. We would use like mail.bulls.com or response.bulls.com, go, those sorts of things. There's a few, ones that we tend to go to there. And then we set up an email address with that.
Yeah, mail@bulls.com. So I think we'll just take a second look at that, but that's really helpful to know.
Okay, yeah. So, if you want to talk offline, I'm happy to set up a call and we can go through all this stuff.
That'd be really great. Yeah, I'd love to share our data. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to Brandy, and, thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jesse. So yeah, we have come to the end. Again, I have the URL on the screen, activate.techrata.com sports-entertainment, or you can just go to activate.techrata.com and go under the industry. We really appreciate you guys attending. We hope this is valuable for you. If you have ideas or things that you would like to have us cover, whether within Eloqua or strategically, feel free to send us a note. We want to make sure that these user groups are really valuable for you all. So your feedback is really important. So have a great rest of your Tuesday. And again, we will get the recordings posted by the end of the week. Until then.